Alright, so we come to part 4, and at least as planned, the final piece on our discussion of Rashi and Rabbeinu Tefillin and the Chabad custom. So, firstly, Rabbi Gimel brought to my attention the Rashba and the Aruch HaShulchan. The truth is, if we're going to do everything, it's Emel Davar Saf. Because when it comes to the issue of Rabbeinu Tefillin, there's also the issue of writing it. Because even if you follow Rabbeinu Tam's order of not inserting them in accordance with the order of how they appear in the Torah, you still have to write them that way. It's one issue. The issue about Tosif, which I mentioned yesterday, that the Alter Rebbe says you don't have to have in mind, that the Tefillin are on condition, but just automatically by putting them both on, it's conditional. Just because by the very fact that you're doing it out of a doubt, that itself becomes a big issue. There's a big taz about that. So there's no end to everything. But from the Rashba, it was interesting, and he doesn't say what the common practice was. Good morning. He doesn't say what the common practice was, but he does say that he follows Rashi after a long, lengthy explanation, taking into consideration all the arguments of Rabbeinu Tam, and says that they're unbonded the same way as he did, and Rabbeinu Yoina and others. So certainly that would have lent weight to the emergence of the custom to follow Rashi. But he doesn't say that it was solidified at the moment, and it may even be implied by the questioner that others didn't do it that way. Now, when did Rashba live?
14th century.
So it's around the same time that we're talking about yesterday with the Smag and the Shalosh Teshuvos Min Hashemayim. So it's around that same century when it emerged to be Rashi's thing, and maybe this would have lent, obviously the Rashba would have lent weight to the custom emerging as Rashi. And as far as the Aruch HaShulchan goes, maybe we'll address it a little bit later because the Rebbe talks about it a bit, but he doesn't say to put on both pairs. He just explains how they are both valid from a Kabbalistic perspective, but on the contrary, it seems like I didn't do a very in-depth reading, but it seems from what he's saying that you should now put on a Rashi, but somehow Rabbeinu Tam is connected to Mashiach's time.
That's right. Yeah.
So maybe you shouldn't be putting Rabbeinu Tam now in the Aruch HaShulchan's view.
Necessary for everyone.
Right. So I don't know for sure that he lends. In other words, he might be a view different. It seems like he's a view different than the Alter Rebbe, in that one does not need to put on Rabbeinu Tam now.
Right, yeah.
So, the Rebbe kind of alludes to it in his talk when he announced that Chabad should put on Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
The other interesting thing is the Teshuvos of the Rambam himself, that he originally put on the Tefillin like Rabbeinu.
That's right, the famous
He found out differently, and he changed to.
Right.
So he understands the Gemara.
So Rambam, which comes after Rashi, Rashba, which comes after Rashi. Rambam, when he writes in his set of halachas to do like Rashi.
That's right.
And then people wrote to him asking, but I see other goyim that say to do like Rabbeinu Tam.
Right.
So Rambam says, I used to do it that way.
Exactly.
And then I switched. So that, along with the Rashba, along with the Smag, along with the Shalosh Min doesn't give a conclusion, but along with Mardil. So over that century or so, that's when it seems like that conclusion would have emerged to follow Rashi.
Yeah, but the Rambam's view
that custom.
It's either or. He doesn't hold that there's like
that one makes the other one invalid.
Yeah,
That's interesting, Tshuva. That's true.
One. Yeah, he understands the Gemara keeps shutai. It's like there's no machlekes in the Gemara. The Gemara is talking about one. We don't know who the one is. We found this is the way to serve the Gemara. He accepted the Gemara like that. But it's interesting. What's we quote that the reason the source of the Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillin is actually based on a Yerushalmi we no longer have.
Yeah, there's also Mechilta involved.
Mechilta seems to be like Rashi, but it does mention the Havayas should be together.
Yerushalmi that we don't have. That's true.
That's right. And that's the source.
The Aruch HaShulchan also says about a Zohar.
No, there's something else. Yeah, but I'm talking about from a.
But he says that the Medrash and element that we're talking about was a Zohar. Maybe yes, maybe no. Anyway. Doesn't matter.
But that's interesting. There's a Tanaic source for the.
There is a Tanaic source in both opinions. That's correct. We mentioned that in previous year, I think.
Not in our Gemara, but in the Gemara.
Yeah. So our Gemara does not imply there was a machlekes, but it's quite possible that there was earlier. I think I mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah.
That it's that we have clear proof of a dispute right after the Gemara's age. From the Gemara's era, it's not 100% clear, but it's quite possible that it predated. That it's there. But one thing is clear: if the machlekes emerged in writing, post Gemara age. Almost immediately after the Gemara's age, you can assume it began before as well.
No, probably before,
right?
Probably in the time
That's
of the
what.
Gemara itself,
That was the point I was making.
The Yerushalmi text, which is we assume is the same time as the Gemara, actually said the Havayas are together. Yeah. We don't have that text, nor which strange Gemara should at least make a reference to it, and it didn't. That's
at any rate, okay.
That's the way it is. But interestingly, the archaeology They actually found, like in the time of the Getzi Scrolls, both types of tefillin.
That's right. Well, that's for sure.
That's no proof of anything, because you don't know.
That's why I said it's not a proof of anything unless you have a text which says it's a common practice. That's why I said with Yecheskel's, even though Smog says that they relied on Yecheskel's,
that's also found by
Yecheskel, but it doesn't say. First of all, that itself is a disputed issue. But more importantly, is even if it's all 100% accurate, it doesn't tell you everybody wore it that way.
Exactly.
It tells you this person did it that way. That's the point I'm making. Unless you have a text, that's what I said with the Rashba. He says this is daiti, and this is what we do. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily say that's what everybody did.
No, not everybody.
Right.
For sure not. But
the first one I saw that is from the Maril and from other things. But that would have pushed it in the way of making it. Okay, let's move forward here. So now we have the Alter B'Siddur on page 19. Now, the Alter B'Siddur is written by, of course, the Alter Rebbe, who also wrote the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch. That's why it's called the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch, founder of Chabad. Now, his Siddur and his Shulchan Aruch are a bit different. It's important to understand this. The Shulchan Aruch that the Alter Rebbe wrote, or the one that we have, is the first version of Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe wrote twice a Shulchan Aruch. And the idea of his Shulchan Aruch was the same objective of the actual Shulchan Aruch itself, and the Torah and the Rambam which preceded it. As generations go on, and more opinions emerge, and more scenarios emerge, it becomes more complex for the simple reader or even the scholar to come to a halachic conclusion. So every few generations or so, there comes along a scholar who's able to consolidate all of these views and puts them together in such a fashion that even the ordinary reader, or even a little bit of an advanced reader, can come to some conclusion. That's what the Rambam did, that's what the Torah did, that's what the Shulchan Aruch did, and the Alter Rebbe did the same. So the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch itself, to a large degree, doesn't necessarily reflect his personal view. It's much more reflective of a collection of views that predated him, obviously through his lens, and obviously in the nuances you find many, many, many chidushim from the Alter Rebbe, but to a certain degree, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch's chidush, the big novelty of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, is the clarity. In other words, in theory, you could find all of the views in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in sources before, but the consolidation of the Alter Rebbe and the way in which he structures it, and not just unlike the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah and the Rambam, which didn't give the backgrounds and underpinnings of the halachas that they come to conclude, that Alter Rebbe does do that. So not only does he consolidate the views, but consolidates them in such a fashion that you can understand where each of the views are coming from. So it's a major monumental work, making it very unique in the genre of consolidators of halacha. The Alter Rebbe is very unique, besides for the Alter Rebbe's chodushim, just in his consolidation, besides for his own nuances, but just in the way he consolidates it in such a clear fashion, and giving the background and reasoning for it. The reason why I'm telling you this is because in the Alter Rebbe's second version of the Shulchan Aruch, his Madura Basra, which he wrote later in life, which actually burnt. There was a famous fire in the city, which burnt a lot of the manuscripts. It seems like it was a heavenly thing that some of these things got burnt, some other manuscripts got burnt, and we only have, I think, the first 3 or 4 siman, the first 3 or 4 sections of version number 2 of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And even from those 3 or 4 versions, you can see that over there he's more focused on his view rather than just consolidating previous views. Now I'm telling this to you because in the Alter Rebbe's Siddur, it's clear, but the Siddur was written not just as a consolidation of previous views, but as an instruction manual specifically for his followers, but even for anybody. The point being that in the Siddur, it would be more reflective of his personal view rather than a collection of previous generations' views. And therefore, in instances, which there are a few, in which the Siddur diverges from the ruling of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Chassidim would follow the Alter Rebbe Siddur, because that's a reflective more of his own view. Especially since, when it comes to the Siddur, he certainly incorporates more Kabbalistic than he would the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is a consolidation of halachic opinions that came before him, with his own nuances and his own seen through his own glasses, through his own lens. But the Siddur would be much more of his own personal view, including some Kabbalistic connections sometimes. So again, Chassidim would follow the Siddur. There are a few classic examples, even with the laws of Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe in the Siddur has a few paragraphs on the laws of Shabbos, and in those paragraphs he diverges a little bit from the Shulchan Aruch, being a little bit more machmir, being a little bit more stringent, and Chassidim would follow what he writes in the Siddur with respect to sesame seeds and other such things. Not sesame seeds, semichkes, sunflower seeds, and other such things.
You think breaking them open on Shabbos, you mean?
Yeah. He's more machmir there. Not because he says there's an actual view, because it says so many problems that you could run into. He says not. He says to stay away from them. Other such things like that.
As of course, he shall them before Shabbos. That'd be all right.
Yeah. No, but there's other things also, making graf shaldei and other things. Anyway, there's a whole list of things he says that make a problem. The point I'm making here is, I'm not going to get into this sesame seeds right now.
For the Siddur, isn't the Siddur just a prayer book?
Yeah, but Siddurs are prayer books, yes, but Siddur is also a guide for life. So it's in history, there are many Siddurim that have been published, that besides for the author choosing and selecting which prayers he finds more important, but also notes as to halacha as it goes along. So the Rabbi Yaakov Emden's halachas are found in a Siddur, for example, and Rashi's halachas are found in the Machzor Vitri's Siddur, and many other such things. The Alter Rebbe Siddur as well includes commentaries of halacha, including Shabbos halacha. Going to come just before the Shabbos prayer, he has basic laws of Shabbos, paragraph, Hilchas Rabbi Shabbat, that's what Alter Rebbe calls it, and other such Siddurim in history that include halacha, not just what to say, even though what to say itself is to be studied. But at any rate, so in the Alter Rebbe Siddur it says like this. So there's two paragraphs that I have here from the Alter Rebbe Siddur. The first paragraph comes from the laws that appear before prayer. The laws that appear before prayer, where the Siddur tells you which brachas to make when you're putting on tefillin and how to put on tefillin. So there it includes basic halachas of tefillin. And there the Alter Rebbe says, Kol asher noga yiras elakin b'libay. For anybody, it's the middle of page 19, for anybody who fear of heaven is important to him, yaniach tefillin d'Rabbeinu tam, should put on tefillin d'Rabbeinu tam, b'loi bracha, without a bracha. When should he do so? Achar tefillah, after prayer. The Beisai in his home, if he's worried about people showing off, if he's worried about people thinking he's showing off, which again we addressed yesterday is not such a problem when everybody else is doing it. But limba b'hem shah achas, and he should wear his tefillin at home for an hour, for some period, either it means literally an hour, for some period, and study. If he's concerned about putting them on in shul, in public, because he's worried about people thinking he's showing off. Or because he wants to learn wearing his Rebbeinu Tam, and it's easier for him to learn at home.
Doesn't make a remark that Naga, it's interesting. Like the Parshas Mitzorah.
Yeah.
To give your Shemaim.
Yeah. But what does Alter Rebbe say? What's the key? What's the interesting line here? That Alter Rebbe writes, to whoever to whom Yiras Shamayim is important to him. Meaning to say, it's not an obligation. Even though we saw yesterday that the Rizal says it is an obligation to wear both, and because of that, Rabbi Azulay writes, you should, not as a doubt, but because each one is intrinsically valued, and indeed there are others, and we'll see soon, who say that it's obligatory to wear two. Here the Alter is saying, anybody whose fear of heaven is important to him. That doesn't sound like an obligation. That sounds like, look, there are two opinions. According to one opinion, you're not putting on tefillin if you don't wear the second one. So if you're fearful of heaven, you should do so.
It's voluntary.
Sorry? It's voluntary, right? But it's more than just it's voluntary, but it's not like a nice chumrah. No. It's like, do you care for Hashem's Torah? And you're worried you might not put on tefillin? Put a second one on. That's almost what it sounds like here. But the key here is that it's not saying it's an obligation, which is unique, even for someone who follows out the Arizal, which from others who follow the Arizal seem to imply that it is an obligation to wear both.
Well,
yeah.
It says without a blessing, but Rabbi, isn't the blessing that you made, if the intention is for either one of them, which is valid, make sure that it's not without a blessing, God forbid.
That's why he's saying without a bracha a second time.
The second time.
So you make a bracha on.
Have an intention
that's correct. You put it. That's right.
You're putting it on for either one of the tefillin, whichever is the one that is going to.
Yeah, or you don't have to have it actually in mind, but it's assumed.
Exactly.
Or it's assumed that way. Exactly. But you're right. No bracha means no second bracha. Exactly. Not a second bracha for Rabbeinu Tam, but you should put on the bracha you're putting on Rashi covers Rabbeinu Tam also. Right. Okay, so that's the paragraph which comes before the laws, before davening, with the laws of tefillin. Then after prayer, after the prayer is done in this siddur, the Alter Rebbe adds a line as to what's our custom after prayer, and he writes, "Minhag, it's a custom, nalniach tefillin Rabbeinu Tam, to put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin." So before he said it's for someone who Yiras Shamayim is important to him, And now he's saying it's a custom. In other words, he's saying it's our custom to be concerned with Yer Shemayim. And therefore, it's our custom, because we are a community that are worried about Yer Shemayim, and therefore it's our custom to put on Rabbeinu Tam. Achar tefillah after prayer, b'lei bracha, without a bracha, relying on the bracha he made for Rashi. V'likra is krishma behen, and to wear, and to say Shema in it. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, because Shema and Tefillin are connected. And others have the custom to add the other two paragraphs that are written in the Tefillin, which are the Kaddish and Vayikviach, and that's our custom, the Chabad custom. Okay, so this is the Alter Rebbe Siddur. So Alter Rebbe Siddur is saying two items. Number one, it's not obligatory. It's Kolashan Nogi Yeshemai Beliboy, Yogalakim Beliboy, someone who the fear of heaven is concerned to him. Number one. Number two, but because of that fear of heaven, it's our custom. Even though for generations Chassidim did not do it. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But this is what Alter Rebbe writes. Now comes the Shara Koilol. The Shara Koilol, as you can see in the footnote 22, is written by Rabbi Avram David Lavut, who is the chief rabbi of Nikolaev and the maternal great-grandfather of the Rebbe. And he also so happens to be the great-grandfather of my grandmother. So happens to be. Great-great-grandfather of my grandmother. So happens. At any rate, the Shara Koilol is basically the foremost commentary on Alter Rebbe Siddur. There's a whole history to how it came about. The Shara Koilol, I think because there was, I don't know exact history, but it seems like there were some versions of the Alter Rebbe Siddur and it became unclear. So he consolidated these things and kind of clarified the Alter Rebbe's nusach, the liturgy of the Alter Rebbe's selecting which texts he put it together. So when it comes to the Alter Rebbe Siddur, the Shara Koilol is what you really learn to go along with it. Okay, so he writes like this, and the bold is what I added. B'loi bracha, the Alter Rebbe writes to put on Rabbeinu Tam without a bracha, and he says v'chein b'Siddur Arizal. The same thing is true. The same thing is true in the Arizal Siddur, to put on Rabbeinu Tam without making a second bracha. The Nida Hatam, and it seems the reason to me is, says the Shara Koilol, ki Arizal lo yachlir rak lam tefillin the Rashi Rabbeinu Tam, that the Arizal, which came to the conclusion to put on tefillin both Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, shneim bebracha achas, that they should each be done with one bracha, meaning one bracha for both of them, but not to put a bracha for each one. Now the Shara Koilol comments, Rabbi Avram David Lavut, in the book called Atzei Eden, which is a commentary on the Mishnayos. So in his commentary on the Mishnah of our Gemara in Menachos, Mevar Ba'aruch, he explains at length, Lahavin to understand. We're not going to look at it because it is at length, but it's a very nice Atzei Eden that I suggest you have a look at, if you could. He explains at length how both are the word of the living God, meaning to say both views are valid. How they can both be right in one subject, those who forbade and those who permit. And he explains there too, it's quite interesting, Seder Hadoros, the order of the generations. Where and which courts, which communities, based on their sages, their local sages, came to the conclusion to follow Rashi. He's analyzing the Gaonic texts, the post Talmudic texts, which we mentioned before, predate Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, but both have the views of either or. And which communities came to the conclusion that's like Rabbeinu Tam, and during some time called Bezdin, every Bezdin, actually Ba Bezdin Acher, until some other court came along to dispute it, and came to dispute the preceding Bezdin. That's what people would do. In other words, if there was a community that they come to the conclusion to follow Rashi, they would follow Rashi until such time that someone came along and disputed them and changed it to Rabbeinu Tam. And following with the proper ordinance of our Torah to follow the majority. And he concludes there, that from the times that Arizal and forward, that through our great sins, through our lack, to our dismay, we don't have proper bezdinim like they used to have, which consolidate these views. Rabbi Yehuda, Beis Yosef, yeah, Harav Beis Yosef. Yeah, they don't have a consolidating place to consolidate these views. No, but that Beis Yosef is a little not so far off from that Arizal. Anyway, We don't have the power to devalidate the loy kariz of Asiyaitoi. We don't have the power to undo that which Arizal came to the conclusion. In other words, in previous generations where they had proper Beth Din and each Beth Din can dispute the preceding Beth Din. But now we don't have that. We are stuck with the conclusion that the Arizal came to. And therefore, umin ha-Torah, and therefore, biblically speaking, kol adam, any individual, anybody who wants to properly fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin, came to besider, mechuyev laniach tefillin to Rashi v'Rabbeinu tam. Until Mashiach comes and will tell us that one is right, one is the other. So what does he say? That's the Eden, based on the Rizal, that it's a chiyuv to put on both pairs of tefillin, considering the fact that we don't have the authority to undo the words of the Arizal. It seems from the Atzei Eden, and the Shara Kol is quoting it, that his grandfather is quoting it, that biblically speaking, one should put on both pairs of tefillin because we have no way of knowing which one's right. And not just whoever has fear of heaven, stronger than the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur. Okay, then he goes on to talk about making a bracha, and we'll leave that for now. Okay, now let's go to the last page, page 20. Now this comes from Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe's magnum opus. Likutei Sichos is 39 volumes, and it's literally Likutei Sichos means collection of talks, and the Rebbe would deliver his Torah orally. In writing, not very much, and there is writing, as I mentioned once here before, is very shorthand. So in writing, the Rebbe published a Haggadah and revised it a number of times, famous Haggadah, but it's very, very shorthand. His writing was much more lucid and much more elaborate. And they were speaking, and they had but people who would transcribe their talks, and they would select talks for the Rebbe to edit, and then they would become published. And over the years, it became 39 volumes of the Rebbe's talks. This is the Rebbe's magnum opus. And in there, in volume 2, so it's from the earlier years, much earlier in the Rebbe's leadership, in page, you see there, volume 2, page 507, footnote 39. The Rebbe writes like this: Re'ei Shar HaKolel Perek Aleph Sim Kuf Lamed. See the Shar HaKolel, chapter 11, section 139, which is what we just read. Number 1. Then he says, U'b'tikunei Zohar Chadash, in a section of the Zohar called the Tikunei Zohar, it says, U'begin de lebekian ilun de dara basra, because we are, in our latter generation, aren't clear in which one's correct. Shavin trei zogit tefillin, both pairs of tefillin are equal. Mashma daitai, the implication of the Zohar is the bedara basra, that in the latter generation, safek bedavar, it's a doubt as to which one's correct. Umuchuyavin, and we are obligated, mipnei safek, because of the doubt, laniach trei zogit tefillin, to wear two pairs of tefillin. And then the Rebbe writes, in the footnote, which in the parentheses, the Rebbe quotes somebody. The Rebbe says, "See that who." Okay, we'll read it. And that which the Morik Tzia, which is a book which seems to contradict that which the Zohar said, that you're obligated to put on both. That in the response of Chaim Shol, which is, by the way, the same response that we read yesterday from Rabbi Azulai, he disputes that which the Morik Tzia writes. See Machzor Bracha for Eschaim, and see Zohar, etc., some other Shashos Mishamayim and other places. Okay. Now the Rebbe adds, in the old versions of the Be'er Heitev is a commentary, classic commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Hayakosov, it would say there, that one who doesn't put on a ben tam tefillin, who could karkafta d'lei monach tefillin. He is like what the Gemara calls a skull that has never worn tefillin. Again, another opinion that says you're obligated to do so. But the Rebbe says, Aval, however, the language of the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur is, anybody who has fear of heaven that concerns him should put on ben tam. Mashma, the implication is, it's not an equal chiv like Rashi. It's only for them. It's only that you should if you care, not that you have to. So the Rebbe is basically making note of the fact of that which we just saw from the earlier text, that there seems to be a dispute, even for those who follow the Arizal. Because of the doubt, does that mean you're now obligated to do so? like Rabbi Azulai said, and like the Bered Heitev said, and like the Tikkun Zohar says, and like what we said earlier, Datzei Edin. Whereas the Alter Rebbe says that we still say that Rashi Tefillin is the primary Tefillin, and yet anyone who has fear of heaven should put on Rabbeinu Tam. Now here I'm adding my own personal commentary here, that perhaps the reason is, it's a foreshadow to the Tefillin campaign. The Tefillin campaign, the whole point was to get out and make Tefillin, put on Tefillin. If the Alter Rebbe were to say that you were obligated because of a doubt to put on Rabbeinu Tam, then that would mean that the Tefillin campaign would require people to walk around with 2 pairs of Tefillin. So it's in a way, on the one hand, Alter Rebbe is raising the bar and saying, I think you should put on both pairs of Tefillin. On the same hand, he's leaving the door open for those who are only putting on Rashi and saying they're still fulfilling their obligation. And thus the Tefillin campaign only has Rashi Tefillin. This is my own foreshadow. It's my own little theory. In other words, if the Alter Rebbe were to take the hard line and say you're obligated to wear the Rabbeinu Tam, then he would be casting aspersions. First of all, on thousands of Jews who wear only one Rashi, and moreover, if Chabad's going to be, the Alter Rebbe didn't have any Tefillin campaign, but maybe in some prophecy of some sort, if in future generations Chabad's going to be putting on Tefillin with people on the streets, and the Alter Rebbe himself writes, you didn't fulfill your obligation unless you wear both, it would make the Tefillin campaign very difficult. So there's a window open. Now the Alter Rebbe says, I think you should put on both pairs, but nonetheless, it's still kosher with just one. Perhaps. This is my own personal suggestion here. Back to the words of the Rebbe. B'chol ofen, nonetheless, sarich in gadol. The Rebbe says it requires serious investigation. Why has the custom been established? Even amongst our community. Anash stands for Anshlei Shemenu, men of our community. To only begin wearing tefillin, the Rabbeinu Tam, meshes man after bar mitzvah, way after the bar mitzvah. And most people will wait till after marriage, even in Chabad communities. This is the Rebbe speaking here. And they were wondering, why is that? If the Alter Rebbe writes, if many who follow that Rizal, including the Shara Koil, say it's an obligation, Shara Koil being a Chabad Rav and your Ketunislav, and the Alter Rebbe writes, it's custom, straight up, you're right, it's custom to put on both pairs. Why isn't that our custom? Whether it's because of a doubt, and therefore you're obligated, like that's Eden, or whether it's because of your Shemayim, like the Alter Rebbe writes, either way, why isn't the custom to do it right away? The Heir Azagam came B'Sefer Piskei HaSiddur La Rav Goyen Chaim Noah, the famous Reb Chaim Noah, who's a Chabad Rav, lived in Yerushalayim, who is also a big commentator on the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch and the Alter Rebbe Siddur, and he also writes the same thing. I don't understand why people aren't putting on both pairs. If the Alter Rebbe writes, it's a custom. Okay. So here already we have that even at the beginning, before the Rebbe announced that everybody should wear Rabbeinu Tam, the Rebbe was already wondering, why is nobody doing it? Because it would seem from the Alter Rebbe Siddur, whether there's an obligation or custom, you should still do it. Now, in Purim, 1937, Tafshin Lamed Vav, Purim Lamed Vav is after December, so it would be after January, so it would be 37. There was giving a talk. In the middle, he announced, it's time that everybody should wear Rabbeinu Tam. Initially, as Rebbe mentions here, the custom was to wait for some time after Bar Mitzvah. And the custom was, when you were somewhere between 18, 19, 20, you would write to the Rebbe asking the Rebbe, have I reached the stage yet where I can put on Rabbeinu Tam? And the Rebbe would tell you yes. The Rebbe would tell you no. My father has such a letter. My father asked the Rebbe, I think when he was 18, don't quote me on the age, but he has a letter where the Rebbe tells him, yeah, it's time for you to start putting Rabbeinu Tam. After my father asked. But then in Purim Lamed Vav, in Purim 1977, they announced
77 or
77.
Nice. Lamed Vav is 37, yes, but that's the Hebrew date, so it's 1970. I said before 37?
37, yeah.
My apologies, 37 never wasn't Rebbe.
Yeah, no, I guess it's before the war.
It's 1977. My apologies, 1977.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Purim 77. They announced, no more asking me. Everybody, you have your answer now. Everybody should put on Rabbeinu Tam.
From Bar Mitzvah on.
From Bar Mitzvah on. And you should stop asking me. And in fact, there's a letter where the Rebbe writes later that even from the people who wear Rabbeinu, even the custom is to start wearing tefillin 2 months before Bar Mitzvah. And practicing. And then you only start making a bracha a little bit later once you know how to put on tefillin properly. And there's a letter that writes that even there you should start with Rabbeinu Tam. Right in the first day you put on tefillin, start with Rabbeinu Tam with 2 pairs. And Rebbe there used the language of chiyuv. In that talk, notwithstanding the fact that Rebbe writes it's a minhag, he quotes his grandfather, the Sharakoilo, from the Zayda, and he quotes the Atzi Eden, and says that it would be a chiyuv to put on Rabbeinu Tam, and therefore no more asking me. Everybody should start wearing Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Subsequently, the Rebbe was pushing for this. One second, before I get to that, I wanted to mention, he's mentioned the Aruch HaShulchan. The Rebbe in that talk mentions that those who want to come with a question from the Aruch HaShulchan who says we don't need to put on Rabbeinu Tam now, this whole Kabbalah, because Rabbeinu Tam is associated with Mashiach's coming, and now we only need Rashi. Says the Rebbe, in previous generations, the fact that they only put on one pair of tefillin should not have bearing on us. Because in our days, we are exposed to much more chachmas chitzonis. Chachmas chitzonis literally translates as external wisdom. That is to say, wisdom and learning and studying in academia that's not of Torah. If your whole world, your whole mind, right? Tefillin is about purity of mind. If your whole world is a world of Torah, that's all you see, that's all you live, that's all you breathe. There's no billboards in the streets in the shtetl that expose you to stuff that are not Torah, to put it mildly. And there's certainly nothing in your coconut would be some better ones. And there's certainly no schooling and whatnot that overexposes the innocent child or adult even to matters that aren't Torah. So the mind is clear to begin with. So one pair of tefillin might suffice. But in our generation, said the Rebbe, where we are exposed to such spiritually lack of cleanly ideas and imagery, we need more ammunition to clear our mind, and therefore we should put a bit of time. Sorry?
Migdar milsa. To add extra pair of tefillin.
Yeah, to have extra pair of tefillin. And therefore, but the Rebbe uses the language of chiyuv. Yeah. And therefore, so even though the Rebbe is saying that now it's an obligation, even though in previous generations they didn't need to, we have to. Subsequently, I don't have the documentation for the story, but the story goes that the Rebbe wanted to push this idea of tefillin Rabbeinu Tam. So the Rebbe wrote a letter asking Rabbi Feinstein. The Rebbe and Rabbi Feinstein had a very close relationship. We have a few letters. There's a beautiful book that was published recently called Menachem Meishav Nafshi, recently with Azimuth in the last 10 years, where they collected correspondence between the Rebbe and other contemporary Torah scholars of his day. And we don't have many of the letters between the Rebbe and Rabbi Feinstein, but it is clear from the letters that there was more communication between them. And we do have the letters, but the Rebbe asks him about the Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. Now the story goes that the Rebbe asked them to start wearing Rabbeinu Tam. The Rebbe requested, they have this kind of relationship, they could do that. And Rabbi Feinstein wrote that his tefillin, his Rashi tefillin, were written in Europe somewhere, and he had a specific scribe write in a specific fashion, specific lettering, and he doesn't want his Rabbeinu Tam to not reflect the same level of his Rashi. It's a big problem in halacha when you set a certain bar to lower, right? We had this rule earlier. You only ascend in holiness, but you don't go down. So that's right. So if one pair of tefillin is of a higher level, and you start putting on another pair of tefillin which is in a lower level, it's a problem for him. So the Rebbe basically told him that I'm going to commission somebody to write the tefillin at your standard. And the story goes that in the middle of the night, Rabbi Zirkin, who's the Sefer, the scribe in Crown Heights, gets a call from the secretariat that wants you to write a pair of tefillin Rabbeinu Tam for Rabbi Feinstein in a specific fashion. Rabbi Feinstein wants it. And the story goes that the Rebbe sent it to him, commissioned it, sent it to him, and he started wearing Rabbeinu Tam because of this. It's quite an interesting little story.
So originally only wear one pair of tefillin?
Rabbi Feinstein? Yeah. So it seems. Well, there are letters to this effect, and my svarim are all in my boxes, but I remember reading it, and it's in there. But the story of Rabbi Zirkin is obviously not in the letters, but at least not so far as I remember. But that's how the story goes.
So he didn't make a Pesach or Moshe in general?
Not that I know of.
Because I know the Gurad, the sheet is different sheet about tefillin.
Yeah.
And in your tefillin campaign today,
only one, of course.
Only putting on one tefillin for Rashi's tefillin. Yeah, so that's another interesting. Even though the Rebbe said use the language of Chiv, it's obligatory. Nonetheless, the Rebbe's Tefillin campaign only has one pair of Tefillin, Rashi.
Yeah,
right?
the make a difference the Yachid, the Anshe Shlomeinu, let's say, and the Rabbi.
Yeah.
Not
So I just want to conclude with some beautiful words.
Yeah, but by the way, they discuss what's the reason pushing off from bar mitzvah until after marriage, because in order to put on tefillin, you have to have both a goof naki and as well.
Never addressed that, and that's what Rebbe said. We need the extra ammunition.
But that's why some are hesitant to put on.
To put on a time because they don't want to have extra.
They're concerned with
They
Hibur
want to wait till they're married?
Yeah, because if the person's not married, the Gemara accepts.
Because certain distractions become less distracting when you're married.
Yeah,
We'll leave it to your imagination.
No, the Gemara accepts if someone's not married, is either thinking about sin or actually doing it. It's like so they think it's a contradiction.
So he needs more help. So
That's what that was counter argument.
That's counter argument.
It's counter argument.
Yeah,
But he's giving both views. That's fine.
But yeah, the other view is that
Okay.
since one view it's only a chumrah anyways.
So
the wife put a chumrah person already.
Okay, I just want to conclude before we go on. I want to conclude with the. If you look at this packet here, I want to conclude with words of the Rebbe in Tavshin Memtes 19. It's probably already 1990 already because it's the summer. And the Rebbe is talking about did I print the wrong pages? I printed the wrong pages. I printed page 2. Oh, sorry, it's okay. It's backwards. Go to the last page and then go to the page before it. The 631 and 632.
It's in right order.
It's in the right order. My book, mine's in the wrong order. Okay, so go to Yud. They were talking about the it's Shabbos Parshas Nachmu, as you can see on the header there. It's a talk from in the summer during the weeks that follow Tisha B'Av, where we read in the Haftarah the Shiva the Shiva Nechemta, the 7 Haftarahs of consolation of comfort, and the first one is Nachamu, where Hashem says twice in a row, comfort, you shall be comforted. So they were talking about the double comfort, and Rebbe writes like this. Rebbe says as follows. This is also an edited talk, a little bit different than Lakota Sichos, which we're not going to get into, but it's also edited. Rebbe writes, Al Pia Amor, based on the above, Le'il, based on what you said before, Ha'ili de Nacham b'Kaflayim, the great value of the doubled comfort, consolation, Shabas Cholos v'Rosh Hashiva de Nechemta, which come at the beginning and end of the 7 weeks of comfort. Move on. It's clear, says the Rebbe. It's understood. Shakli, that the vessel that we need to make ourselves, L'kabel Nechamazu, to be able to receive God's comfort. Shetumshich v'tizgala, so that it should be drawn down and should be revealed with tachter and should permeate Lamata b'pamamish, down into our world, literally. We should really get this comfort. The service, our service of Hashem, must be in parallel with in such a manner to kaflam mutashi in a double measure. In the same way Hashem's comfort is doubled, so if you want to get double comfort from Hashem, our service to Hashem has to be doubled measure. Both with respect to oneself, and so too with respect to affecting somebody else. Is to say, that his own service of Hashem, the way in which he works with himself, should be doubled effort. And his work with others and influencing others should also be with doubled effort. And go page 632. Ruprati says here more specifically. The stakes of us from 2 extremes. Extreme number 1. Even when one finds himself in a very lowly level. One can and therefore must to begin his service right away in such a service that doubled. In other words, don't go gradual. We don't have time for gradual. Dive right all the way into the end. You're at a low place, but you want to start serving Hashem. Jump in with doubled effort. To a true doubledness. In an addition and in an elevation that's incomparable, meaning jump right to the top, go all the way in, hands and feet. And by way of example, you right away start off with the best kind of mitzvah. Not like, I'm starting now, I'll do the lowest level, and as I gradually get better, I'll increase my mitzvahs, make them look nicer. No, you're taking on a mitzvah, take it on right away in the best possible way. Including the same thing including with respect to education. That is to say, you don't educate children to say, oh, here's the least you can do that you can get away with, and only when you get older, add higher levels of service of Hashem. Teach the child the top. Give him Rolls Royce from the start. V'adam, the contrary, kitev aktanim, and the contrary, when it comes to the nature of children, shalaikum kol davar toiv amiti kol inter mitzvahs. When you teach a child tell him this is good, tell him this is what Hashem wants, he's excited about it. So why are you dumbing it down? Give him the best. Give him the top. So go to 114. That puts an example. Mm-hmm. What do I mean of an example of someone who starts right from the beginning with a doubled effort and right away starts with the best possible type of mitzvah? Mitzvah tefillin, like for example, mitzvah tefillin. Even though in previous generation, they didn't put on Rabbeinu Tam right away. Even those who were very particular about their mitzvahs, and even those who were want to make their mitzvahs beautiful, in previous generations, they didn't start putting Rabbeinu Tam right away. Only sometime after the mitzvah, or after their wedding, and like Rabbi mentioned, Mishum Taras Aguf, because they want to have a clean body and a clean mind, etc. Nevertheless, but in this generation, the minig has started to expand. The custom has been to expand. This is 1989 since 1977. It's almost 12 years. Befrat minig Chabad, and specifically the custom of Chabad. We start putting our Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, but man at the same time. At the same time that we start putting on Rashi tefillin. Including including the time of preparation before bar mitzvah. I mentioned before that we put on that the custom is to put on tefillin 2 months before bar mitzvah in practice. They were saying, don't wait till sometime later and then you'll increase your mitzvah. Precisely because we're at just a low state and we want to have double comfort from Hashem and we need that double comfort from Hashem. Then you put in double effort, and therefore right from the start, he's not even bar mitzvah yet. He's 12. He's not obligated in any tefillin. But right away he's putting on both pairs of tefillin. Notwithstanding the fact that in previous generations they only put on one and they put a second one later. They were on a higher level. Today we're on a lower level where we really need a double comfort from Hashem. It's time for us to put in a double effort. And therefore right from the start, 2 pairs of tefillin. And here there besides, look at the base on the 507, 139, which is the footnote we just read before. Mm-hmm. And then he says, when his Bar Baruch and explain the length, in the Sikh of Purim, 1977, which is also which I verbally repeated for you, even though we didn't read it. So that was the one extreme. The other extreme that he goes on to say is, even someone who's at the high level, he thinks the service of Hashem is all perfect, he should put in a double effort of doubling it, like Misha Meisei Mana, someone who has 100, writes a Messiah wants 200, and someone who has 200 doesn't want 300, wants 400. So it's not increase. It's not even increase. It's what's the word? It's
progression.
No. But when like a compounded increase. So if I have 100 and I want 200, when I get to 200, I don't want 300. I want 400. Exponential growth, right? And therefore, so on both extremes, the guy at the lowest level goes in hands and feet all the way to the end because he wants double comfort from Hashem, and the guy at the top, who thinks his service of Hashem is at the highest level, his increase shouldn't be minimal because, I reached so high. No, double increase. All of this to say in conclusion, it's clear that right from the start, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillin had equal validity. Over time, for whatever reason, Rashi became the primary practice. When Rashi's Tefillin became the primary practice, what was the attitude towards Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillin? So some said Rabbeinu Tam's Tefillin is still equally valid, and therefore I don't know why people are stopping to put it on. Some said, we come to the conclusion that it's Rashi, then it's Rashi. You want to be extra stringent, put in Rabbeinu Tam, which introduced the whole idea of perhaps showing off. Then we had the Arizal, which came and said, both pairs of tefillin are valid. Now what's our attitude towards that? One attitude is, if both pairs of tefillin are valid, then you're obligated to do so. Other option is, if the Arizal says both pairs of tefillin, then Rashi still remains the primary, because that's been the halachic conclusion. But because that says both are valid, if you have a yirah shamayim, you have a feeling of fear of heaven, put on both. And then finally, you have the Rebbe which comes along and said, precisely because of our generation and what we're exposed to, we need extra ammunition. And thus, both pairs of tefillin right away. In a similar vein, that when Rebbe introduced the Shabbos candle campaign, pushing that women and girls should light Shabbos candles, the Rebbe encouraged that his Chassidim should start lighting Shabbos candles right from 3 years old. Rabbi even once mentioned it even earlier. And in response to those who said, why are we doing that? The Rebbe said something like, in the previous generation, don't lit candles at 3 years old. The Rebbe said something to the effect of, I haven't seen this written anywhere, but this is the quote that I've heard, so I don't have a source for this, but the idea is true, even if the Rebbe didn't say the words, that you're right, in previous generations they didn't light Shabbos candles at 3, but they also didn't have television. So in our generation, where the world around us is in our face with all of its offerings, it's our obligation to dive in headfirst, right from the beginning, and therefore take the vaccination. Therefore, there being spiritual vaccination, and therefore they were strongly pushed that as Hasidim and even beyond should wear both pairs of tefillin, having gone through everything we did. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow we'll get back to Menachos, which we all began. Wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you so much.